Well, hello and welcome to our third episode of the Open Hearts Club Google Hangout. You get the opportunity to hang out with my friend Terry Malloy from the UK and interview amazing guests. And you know, when Terry and I had the idea of creating these Hangouts, we set the intention from the very beginning that we wanted to have fun. So I want to welcome you with an open heart, and and let you know that today's conversation is really an opportunity for you to connect with us, for us to connect with you, for Terry and I to connect with our special guests and explore their own journey in life, a journey into the heart and what that means. And if at any time during our broadcast you have any questions for our special guests, you'll notice that there's a Q&A button right there on the page if you're watching this on our live event page. So without further ado, let me just take a moment to welcome Terry, and then we'll introduce Michael. Terry,
Hi,
how you
Gabriel.
doing, buddy?
I'm doing well. I'm doing well. It's slightly colder in England today, so I've had to put a sweater on. It's the first time in 9 weeks that I've had to put a sweater on in the evening.
Well, good for you.
Yeah.
And I say that because we're right here in Cape Town. We're in the middle of our winter. And so when you're complaining about being a little bit cold, I'm like,
Yeah. But I understand Michael has got about 40 degrees where you are, Michael, haven't?
Well,
Yes.
thankfully, I'm in Alicante today, so we're a little bit cooler. But certainly, where I live down in Coeen in the south, it's about 40 degrees at the moment. Yeah.
Yeah. Hey,
Hi,
Michael,
hi everyone.
would you?
Nice to be here. Hi, Gabrielle. Hi, Terry.
Yeah, good. Michael, would you mind just lowering your camera just a little bit because of the that lower third? It's actually covering up almost half of your beautiful beard, and
Ah.
we don't want that to happen. Yeah. So today, joining us in this conversation is somebody that is actually new in my life. I had the opportunity to connect with Michael about a month and a half ago. We met at Brian Johnson's Intheo's community academy. I'm a member of the academy. I've signed up for this wonderful university, if you want to call it, where you get the opportunity to learn about things that they don't teach you in school. And when I came across his postings and his new book, I just knew, I don't know if you ever had the experience that sometimes you just meet somebody and right away there's a calling or an impulse or an attraction that just simply says like, oh wow, I have to connect with this guy. And that's actually what I felt. And it was really interesting because it was very much mutual. I found him, I found that after we connected, we both felt instinctively that we needed to have a conversation. And so after that conversation, it became very clear to me why we needed to connect. Because I found in Michael somebody who had traveled a very similar journey to mine into his own heart. Whereas I found my way through, by coming to Cape Town and volunteering in a nonprofit organization, Michael seemed to have found his through a very specific, art, the art of poetry. But to actually tell you a little bit about Michael, I'm just going to let him describe in his own words a little bit about who he is and how this beautiful book that I'm now halfway through reading, Escape to the Homelands of the Heart, how it came about. So, Michael, if you could just tell us a little bit about, you, where you're from originally, and a little bit about how this journey began for you.
Hi, Gabrielle. Thank you. Hi, Terry.
Hi.
I'm originally from London, and I grew up there. Spent the first 23 years of my life there. And from quite an early age experienced a lot of difficulties with addiction and stuff like that, and really feeling a complete disconnection from my heart, particularly in school, and really not feeling any kind of resonance with what I was learning, and just there was just no heart in it for me, and I just seemed to be one of those people who needs to put their heart into what they do.
Mm.
And at 25, and really by nothing short of a miracle, kind of still alive, I made my way into rehab for the third time, and began this process of change, this process of healing. And it was really when I realized it was change or die, you know, that I kind of decided to really make a change. And then I moved to South Africa and spent a couple of, well, nearly 18 months in Plettenberg Bay on the garden route, and then moved to Cape Town, and started living just around the corner from where you live now, Gabriel, as we discussed, which was a really interesting coincidence. And because I was sort of in this path of change and healing and recovery, I realized I had to be involved with work that was involved with helping others change and heal and recover. So that's why I decided to do a coaching qualification. A friend of mine called Rob Montgomery, who also lives in Cape Town, inspired me to do a coaching qualification, and that's why I moved to Cape Town to go and study at SACAP, which you're familiar with.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you know, the coaching world is very sort of confusing and mysterious for the first few years, you know. And
I agree with that, Your Honor.
But you're sort of getting exposed to everybody's stuff. You know, you're seeing this theory and this methodology and this model and this framework, and it's all very exciting, but it can be quite overwhelming. And kind of, you know, I completed my training in 2010. And from then onwards was able to specialize a little bit. I chose to specialize in the thinking environment, which is there's a wonderful thinking environment community in Cape Town. And then kind of I started like drilling down a bit more, and I got to this place about a year ago of working with poetry. Of working with poetry as a means to doing inner work, as a means to mitigating emotional ups and downs, as a means to working with archetypes, as a means to processing challenges from a kind of heart-focused place, and also as a means of recording memories, and which was something that was very important to me because I had, you know, a lot of my life was a blur for a lot of years with all of my addictive behavior and stuff like that. So yeah, it was just a kind of natural. It was just a kind of natural process of growth, really, I guess, and just finding what really worked for me, particularly in my difficult years, and kind of infusing that with my kind of psychological insights and coaching background, I guess.
Yeah, and Michael, when I think, you know, I find it really interesting that you said that you decided to specialize in the thinking environment, yet you found yourself making into the feeling environment of the heart through the poetry. Was there any particular event or something in your life that guided you or that took you into poetry? Just like your friend invited you to look at coaching and you went into coaching, like what was it exactly that happened where you finally said, okay, I'm going to give this thing, poetry, a chance and see where this takes me?
Well, there's a tiny little book called Whispers of the Beloved, and it's a few very short Rumi poems. And someone gave me a copy of this book, or lent me a copy of this book, and I was reading Rumi's poetry for the first time, and just noticing what he was doing, noticing that he wasn't trying to impress me or cultivate some kind of false elegance, or he was just speaking the words of his heart, and it was just so powerful and beautiful. It just awakened something within me, and I started to write my own poetry. Very, very simple poetry that was really just a cathartic release. And then this sort of love affair began, and it was on and off, on and off, on and off. And then, as I say, about a year ago, or maybe a little more, I suddenly had this kind of... I remember I had been inspired by a chap called Michael Boyle, who's really a wonderful man and involved with an organization called Boys to Men that really helps young guys gain a sense of independence and self through a kind of initiation into manhood, or like a really, and he's a very inspiring guy. And he's always quoting poems and sharing poems, and he's like a real cool, laid back, kind of laconic kind of dude. And I was like, this is not the usual poet, you know. This is not the usual person who would be speaking such things. And it really just kind of started to tickle something in me, you know. It really started to awaken something in me, and my poems started to come up, and they were very much just heart focused, because I've been doing a lot of group work and really focusing on just holding people in my heart and just really being completely present, instead of trying to be like, oh, what should happen now? What's the next trick someone should do? What's the next part of the methodology we should apply in this moment to this person's process? And instead, just completely trusting and holding. And I noticed that space, that incredibly powerful space, which I'm sure you've done all the kind of scientific research into through the Heart Math Institute and all that very inspiring stuff that I'm longing to spend some more time and learn a bit more about from you. I don't know, just started happening for me, and I started to write. I started to write poems, but they weren't ways of impressing people, or you know, particularly beautiful rhymes, or they didn't have any particular need for affirmation or approval, and it just became this incredibly healing process.
Yeah.
And then the whole kind of story of how the book actually came into being was quite an interesting one. Well, I started writing these poems, and they just started pouring out of me. It was like this part of me had just woken up, and I would wake up in the middle of the night, and I would have some sort of poem. I'd been dreaming a poem or something like that, and I would write it down, and I would go back to sleep, and I'd wake up with all these poems on my phone, you know. And then I got to a point where I had so many, I was like, it would be nice to create a couple of books. So I thought, okay, I'm going to have to find someone to help me make some ebooks. Because I had vowed never to write another book after my first book, which was a novel, which took a year and was incredibly painful and just a horrendous process for me and my wife and my daughter. And I put it on Odesk or something, and this woman called Connie Watts got back to me, and she was like, "Oh yeah, I'd love to do this, and I want to do it for free. I'd really like to round out the portfolio. They have a small digital publishing company in Seattle." And I was like, great, this is really a great sign, you know, into this whole synchronicity thing and everything. So I started sending her these poems, and she was like, I really love these poems. But there's this wonderful quote by a guy called Don Marquis, and he says that basically writing a book of prose is like throwing flower petals into the Grand Canyon and hoping for an echo. You know, it's just an absurd thing to do, you know, or to expect to get anything out of. And she said, well, look, it seems like, you know, there's something different going on here. Why don't you write a little bit about what you're actually doing here, what the process is behind this? So I said, okay. And then kind of like 3 months later, I got back to her with this book, you know, and said, here's this book I've just written. And she was completely shocked. She was like, I thought you were just going to write a few paragraphs about this stuff. And we had this book on our hands, and then it took like another 3 months of tweaking, and then there was like a further sort of 6 months of production, with there's all the time-lapse videos, and some of the poems are read over music and time-lapse, and the whole transmedia thing is really, really interesting, and it's about really kind of creating a moment for someone so they can have this experience, this multi-sensory experience, rather than imparting any kind of wisdom or, you know, trying to indoctrinate anyone into any particular way of thinking. It's all about, you know, a person's own realizations coming up and all that kind of stuff, which is what the book is really all about. So that's the kind of story in a nutshell, I guess.
Wow, that's very inspiring, Michael. And you know, I'm listening to you, and some of the thoughts that are coming up for me was that I don't think I would ever write a poem unless unless I'm absolutely in love with somebody. That's kind of when it flows, or unless I'm like really depressed, like very, very depressed. I think those are the only 2 times in my life when I've actually felt compelled to create some kind of a poetry. And even then, whether it's like highly in romantic and in love, or very depressed, there's a part of me that obsesses over making it perfect. Like even though I'm being miserable, it's gotta sound perfect. And then if it doesn't sound perfect, then I've gotten even more depressed. So I just kind of threw the whole experience out as just something not for me. Terry, what about for you? Do you have experience in poetry? Are you a poet at heart?
No, in a nutshell. and I'm going, in a sense, straight right back to school time, in English language classes where we had to do poetry. I really couldn't. I couldn't get my head around actually what poetry was. Whether it was, it had to rhyme, but it doesn't have to rhyme, and so I've never been able to. I've never been able to write poetry. It wouldn't be something that I would look to convey a feeling on. But I do enjoy reading or having poetry read. That I don't know. I don't know if this means if this has any resonance with you, Michael. But there's almost a sense that poetry is like painting is to photography. That a novel is a sort of created vision, like a photograph is, but poetry is very abstract, like a painting should be, and it's what the recipient puts into it that actually makes it come more alive. Does that sort of is that your sense of what poetry is to you?
Well, it's been really interesting. That's a great question. Just to explore what poetry really is.
Yeah.
And what the kind of the writing the book led me to is that basically poetry is just another avenue of interpretation that a human being can take in the world. So some poets are very, have these incredibly complex rhyming schemes and this very ornate language, and others just don't. And I was particularly someone like Rumi, for example, who's translated so beautifully by people like Coleman Barks. It's just really simple, clear, spiritual practice. It's really just an opportunity for him to talk about the paradox of being alive, to talk about the agony of being aware of God or the universe and not being able to touch it or kiss it or hug it the way he would want to, or to dissolve into it, as his kind of very flamboyant language describes. But what's really interesting is that I sort of discovered that there's an intelligence to poetry which has been very much recorded throughout time. Like Gregory Bateson, for example, who's quite a famous epistemologist, observed that nature spoke in metaphors, and that metaphors is also the language of poets. So it's this incredible kind of we have this wonderful connection to the external world and to the way nature unfolds in front of our eyes, but it's also this amazing connection to the internal world and to the unconscious and to all the kind of emotional vicissitudes and all the rest of it that's going on inside of us. So there's really a kind of, just as we have a kind of emotional intelligence, as Goldman has developed so amazingly and so beautifully, and others have supported him in, we have a kind of poetic intelligence. And it's really interesting, like Plato said, for example, that, poetry is closer to vital truth than history. It's just kind of, it's words of the heart. It gives you a sense of a time. It gives you a sense of a place. And it has this incredibly evocative impact on a human being. To read a poem is just a powerful thing for some of us,
What would be the difference then for you between a poem and a piece of prose or an essay, as opposed to a novel?
Not a lot in particular. I am not like an academic poet, if you like. I'm not. I left school when I was 15 years old. Really, I don't have any kind of professional academic training or any such things in this area, or even English literature. I think I got a B in my English literature GCSE. It's just, as long as it's coming from the heart, and as long as it's you just sharing your truth, to me it's poetry.
So what would really help me, Michael? Do you have a piece that you could read so I could get a sense of
that is great. Yes, I love that, Michael. Because I've been dying to ask you that, because we were talking about reading poetry, and I've been also sitting with like, well, but would you be willing to just read one of your poems from Escape to the Homelands of the Heart?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think just to give you a little bit of context, the poems weren't written to impress or to amaze anyone. They're really just examples of my own inner work. And they really just serve as a guide to someone else to say, hey, you can explore your emotional landscape in this way, and it's a beautiful, wonderful tool in order to do that. So I'll read a poem now, but I'll ask if we could sort of get into a bit more of a kind of relaxed space. Okay. So I'm going to ask that we maybe close our eyes, if that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
So if we just close our eyes and just breathe. And just feel your heart beating in your chest. I can feel a little bit of, there's that wonderful sensation of anxiety, of the unknown, of am I going to do it right? And all. It's just the heart's just beating in my chest. It's just a wonderful feeling to observe. And this poem is called Escape to the Homelands of the Heart. Deep in your chest, freedom softly beats a drum. A gentle, whispering song. No soul shall ever truly silence. Escape to the homelands of the heart. Awaken the poet within.
Wow. Wow.
So
it's yeah. Yeah, go ahead, Michael.
Yeah, that's the introduction to the book. Yeah.
Well, what I wanted to say, Michael, is that in your book, which as a book that is done in the format of transmedia, you actually get to hear Michael speak his own poems, and some of the poems are just audio. Some of them have beautiful videos and beautiful images and visuals. But some of the majority of the poems, there's a music playing in the background, and I can't remember which was one of the poems. One of the ones towards the end of the book, where there's a heartbeat in the background, and playing in one of the videos, and it was really beautiful because in the experience that I just had listening to you, my heartbeat was the background of the poem. And so that allowed me to connect at a much deeper level, because as you're speaking about the drum, I hear my own inner drum. As you're speaking about awakening the inner poet, I tell myself, well, I'm not a poet really, but it's the awakening of the unknown like wanting to be created and emerge from me, and it was really beautiful. It was really beautiful. Terry, what was your experience?
One of actually overriding permission, of being gentle with myself and giving myself permission just to be and explore. And bearing in mind what I said earlier, Michael, about my position in terms of my history with poetry, I really felt that sense of giving myself permission. That doesn't mean to say that I'm wanting to sort of rush out and do something with poetry now, but there was an opening of being prepared to explore how I give myself permission in areas of my life that I wasn't aware of as a feeling before you read that. So thank you for that. I really appreciate that.
And there's something really important you picked up on there about permission. And that's really what the book is all about. It's just an invitation to say, hey, give yourself permission to explore this part of yourself. It's there, and it's wonderful. You know, that's really it. And then each chapter just looks at a different area of how you might explore.
So did a way come for you when you finished your coaching training to take coaching principles and put it into prose? Were you conscious of that, or did it sort of come as like an epiphany?
Yeah, it was. I mean, it was certainly it was a bit later after because I finished in 2010, and I didn't really start working with poetry until about 2012, 2013, I would say. In this way, I mean, I wrote the odd poem and that kind of stuff, but you know, I've had a blog for a few years, you know, and that's a great environment just to be a poet, and not a very good one, you know, and just to share these words of heart, and it really gives you that positive reinforcement, and it's just lovely to have somewhere to share. And I think that's an equally important part of the poetic process, is if we're going to have this wonderful introspective experience, and we're going to bring up these amazing pearls from the kind of the deep seas of our unconscious. It's wonderful to share those, and it's scary, and it's a little bit edgy, and it kind of just puts us out there in a new way. And for me, that's an equally important part of the poetic process. It just kind of connects us to ourselves and others in a really wonderful way.
I think you said something there that means a lot to me, and there's a vulnerability in expressing yourself and your feelings in poetry. I mean, any creative process where you put yourself out there, people either get it or they don't get it. And we live in a world that really is polarized between praise and criticism. So to put your heart and soul out into something, and detach from how somebody's going to receive it, is a hugely courageous thing. And in that sense, I would encourage everybody to at least do something creative, something that is of themselves, and let other people shine a light on it, because it's in a sense it's the only way we know whether we're doing it from the heart. Because if we're doing, if it's from the heart, I feel if we're coming from the heart, we're protected. But if we're coming from the head, we'll feel the criticism, and it will hurt more. Does that feel true to you, Michael? That when you're coming?
Yes, very much so. I think any opportunity we have to really come from the heart, which again, you know, the Heart Math Institute has been really experimenting with and creating evidence around. It's a wonderful opportunity for ourselves. It has this incredible restorative impact on us. It has this healing impact on us. It has this healing impact on other people. And, you know, for example, you have the courage to put yourself out there, and you give someone else the courage to do it as well. And, you know, you create just this catalytic explosion of love and creativity.
Which brings me to the question, Michael. How are then you using as a coach? How are you using poetry then as a tool? Because I can just imagine, like somebody wants a particular kind of coaching, like business coaching. They'll go to a business coach. Heart intelligence. They want to access their heart intelligence. The heart intelligence coach. But to go to somebody that uses poetry, like what? I'm just really curious. I mean, do you use it as a tool? Do you have clients write poems or connect with the inner poet? Like, how does that work?
It's a very interesting question, and it's really early days. And what I've really been doing is experimenting. I've put the book out there for free in the gift economy. So I've got this profound sense of gratitude around it, and people are picking it up, and they've got a profound sense of gratitude around it because they're like, "Hey, wow, this is really beautiful. You've put huge amounts of work into this, and you're giving it away." And some of the people that have picked it up have just bloomed. They've just had these extraordinary, almost like Rumi-like experiences where you just suddenly everything there's just poems pouring out of you. And some of the poems that have recently been shared with me, with people doing their inner work, have just been amazing. So in terms of how we can use this application in our coaching, or really on ourselves, there's the opportunity to, particularly with negative judgments, for example, I can externalize my judgments in poetry. I can look at myself, there's a lovely exercise in the book, and it's about just write down your judgments. So I hate poetry, it's stupid, people who read poetry are idiots, it's a load of soppy nonsense, for emotionally sensitive weirdos and upper class wallies, and all that kind of stuff. And you're starting to externalize all these judgments that are really just hanging around in your head, And when you get some perspective on that, you're already there. You're already starting to increase your level of self-awareness. So it can be something as simple as that. And then maybe I could give you an example of one of the people who's really kind of taken to this way of doing their inner work, because it's all very well for me to sit here and go, oh yeah, you can do this and you can do that, but what I'm really most excited about is the evidence that's mounting up in others.
Lovely.
Yeah, so let me just pull this up for you. Okay. So this woman's name is Sihanouk Lee, and she's a scientist from San Francisco, and she has no particular poetic background or any particular any particular development in that area. And she picked up the book, and she's just really loved it, and she's really started to work through the exercises. And this is an example of one of her pieces of inner work or poetic contemplation. And the amazing thing about poetry is that it's cognitive and contemplative. So you've got this wonderful balance between ego and soul, and that just seems to have a very healing impact on a person. So this poem is called Into the Abyss. And Sihanouk, like anyone else, has had her dark times, and this is a way that she navigated that experience through poetry. Into the abyss. Without a warning, I am suddenly taken into the abyss, losing all that connects me to here and now, falling deep into the bottom. I close my eyes, remembering only a faint memory of the past, tethering me to the hope of returning to the surface, without losing myself entirely. I just wait patiently, biding time for the passing of the spell, praying that my love will stay intact. When I am released from its grip, I am learning to stay calm in the darkness, embracing the stillness of the nothingness, just like I have learned to ride the waves of pain, writing it out in words. I open my eyes with curiosity, discovering thin slivers of light radiating down from above, lighting the path, leading me to the surface.
Wow.
Yeah, when I read that, I was just, wow.
Wow.
I mean, we've all experienced those dark places, and just the way that she explored that, and just, it's a gift for the world. And it's also an incredibly healing and wonderful thing for her to have done as well. So that would be one example.
Yeah.
Wow, that's really beautiful. You know, you reminded me as you're speaking that I remember about 2-3 years ago I did a training with Integral Coaching Canada, which is really it's like the only, as far as I'm aware, is the only school that Ken Wilber has actually like what would you call it?
Accredited?
Yeah, accredited or basically referred to as they're really teaching, applying his integral framework to coaching.
Mm-hmm.
And I read, Michael actually, it's one of his big influences has been Ken Wilber. Throughout the book, he actually lists different people who have influenced him, not just in poetry, but on his journey. But the integral framework uses as a tool metaphors, and the coach is invited to actually formulate a metaphor for the client at the beginning of the coaching, which it's described as the current way of being, and then a future metaphor that describes the desired way of being. So a metaphor that describes where I am right now, my current pain, what I think is missing in my life, how I'm showing up for myself and for others, and then create one that shows you a new possibility. And I remember when I was doing this training, like I worked very closely at that time in my life. I was a pleaser. I'm a recovered people pleaser these days. I was a pleaser, and so I had all these commitments that out of wanting to please other people, I had said yes to, and all these commitments were like dragging me down, and I just felt like I had shackles. And so I remember working with this integral coach. The metaphor that I came with was I was the overcommitted husband. No, the overcommitted polyamorous husband. That's what it was. So I had like all these wives, all these projects, all these people I had said yes to, I was married to, but I was so overcommitted and it was weighing me down. And the metaphor that I started working with was the metaphor of the pilot navigating an airplane on towards the island of abundance. That was a new metaphor. And it meant that these wives could be in the airplane only if they were going with me to where I was going. If they had the same intention, in other words, if they're aligned with my purpose. So all these projects, unless they were aligned with my purpose, they could not get on the airplane with me. And I tell you, the metaphor, it worked because it helped me at the level of the unconscious mind to understand the situation that I was in without having to go into the details of all the projects. To understand, it's just like I just overcommitted. All these projects are my wife's, and what I want to is a specific destination that is freedom, that is abundance, but I only want to do it with those projects that are in line with what makes me light like an airplane, that allows me to fly. So I could see, how you could, for example, could have a client, write a poem at the beginning of your coaching that expresses where they are, and then actually write another one, that would express where they would like to be at the end of the year working with you, or at the end of the time. What do you think? Does that resonate with you?
Absolutely, very much so. Very much so. Any kind of metaphor is the territory of the poet. Any kind of metaphor, and that even goes so far as language, which we all use language. We all speak in metaphors. So we are all essentially, everything we say is a poem.
Yeah. Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
but we're completely disconnected from the kind of tactile feeling wonderfulness of the real poetic flow that can just flush through a person.
Yeah.
And what's really interesting, is another Plato quote. He said that those that tell the stories rule society.
Mm-hmm.
And wouldn't it be great if the poets were telling the stories? Because the poetic angle on life can be so uplifting and enriching, um, as opposed to some of the more rigid language that we tend to use these days, and we're stuck on bottom line, and we're stuck on logistics, and we're stuck on deliverables.
Michael, I'm intrigued in the concept of poetry as being something uplifting. Can people though take that darkness inside them and express it in a darker form of poetry? Does that becomes cathartic because they're releasing a dark thought as opposed to an uplifting thought?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. The inner poet does not discriminate.
Right.
It's really just an opportunity to fish in the waters of within and
Right.
pull up whatever needs to come and let it keep coming.
Yeah.
It's really, there's no judgments. There's no good or bad, right or wrong. It's completely, it's in the field. It's operating beyond that. It's all energies are welcome, and all energies are celebrated by the poet.
Mm. It would seem to me to be a very good way of detaching at the start of a coaching session where somebody is, because it's not the normal way to write and express yourself. So in a way, doing it forces you to become detached from your ego and your thinking.
Right. Yeah. I can see there's numerous applications for this technology, and what's so wonderful about it is it's just forgotten. It's not like we're doing something new here. We're just remembering an incredible faculty, and that's what's so special about this work for me. I don't feel like I am really indoctrinating anyone into anything. I feel like I'm just kind of helping people wake up a part of themselves, which I was lucky enough to wake up within myself, and just saying, hey, this is just a great part of you. Just have fun with it. And the creative exercises that you're coming up with, Terry, and that you're thinking about, Gabriel, are I believe, as Ken Wilber talks about, growth happens in developmental lines, or through multiple intelligences. And it's becoming clearer and clearer to me that there is a distinct line or multiple intelligence that is poetic intelligence. There's genuine value in that line of development that can add incredible benefit to an individual's life and to the wider world.
Absolutely. Terry, would you mind just quickly checking your camera, because I seem to have lost video here on the panel.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, just double checking, because I can see your your picture, but not your. There you are.
Yep.
Okay, good. All right.
Okay.
Thank you for that. Yeah. So Michael, there's this question that I would love to start a tradition at these open heart clubs hangout. This is only the third one, and you are actually our very first guest with Terry. Up until now, it's just been Terry and I, myself, and just hanging out. And so the tradition is basically to just ask you just a few questions, okay, as it regards to what it means to have an open heart. So the very first thing is, what is an open heart to you? What does it mean to have an open heart?
An open heart to me is a broken heart. It's a heart that has experienced the necessary wounding that brings humility and courage and passion to a human being.
Okay, great. And then what opens your heart the most?
Full-blooded, courageous expression in any form, be it animal, human being, nature, just a beautiful wave down at Cormacky, or, you know, standing on the side of a hill, or my daughter doing one of her amazing dances or singing one of her songs, or Terry just smiling at me with his beautiful smile. You know, whatever it has to be, it's just, yeah, just expression, just authentic expression.
Okay, great. What closes your heart quickly and immediately?
Judgment. Good and bad, right and wrong, mine and yours, good and evil, just the vitriol of dichotomy-based thinking.
Okay. And then, what is the quickest way you can open somebody's heart who's close? A heart of a person who's close. You, Michael. The quickest way to open somebody's heart.
That's a wonderful question, and it's something that I'm living into. I believe the quickest way is by opening your own, by being vulnerable. Or there's that wonderful Marianne Williamson quote, you know, as we let our own light shine, you know, unconsciously we give others permission to do the same.
Okay,
it's
beautiful.
A catalytic act.
Yes, yes, absolutely. Okay, last question from my side, because I have a feeling that Terry's got a few questions as well. And who do you believe in this world, or one or two people that you know without a doubt have a full open heart and move through lives? People that inspire you because they have big open hearts.
Wow, that's a very interesting question. There's too many to name, you know, and there's and we're all so wonderfully imperfect and so hopelessly fractured, you know. I think we all have our moments. We all have our moments, and some of us practice a little bit more and are willing to put ourselves out there a little bit more. And I personally really resonate with that. I really appreciate vulnerability, openness, honesty, radical self-disclosure. You know, it really inspires me to really be myself. So anyone who on a good day is willing to be who they really are and let the world know, I'm going to be standing there going, woohoo!
Okay. Beautiful, beautiful. Terry, do you have some questions
I do.
this nature from Michael? Okay, good. Go for it.
I do. I'd like to know, Michael, what incident opened your heart?
What incident opened my heart? Terry, it was a psychotic break. It was a drug-induced psychotic break that destroyed my perspective of the world. And I was in this very, very egocentric level of development, and I had this sort of I was in India, and I was very sort of in the whole scene and the drugs and everything. And I had this sort of unity consciousness experience, this experience of oneness. And from the egocentric level of development, that is the most terrifying thing a person can experience, because everything's connected. There's this whole story that develops, and I went into this psychotic break, and it was so terrifying and so humbling and so crushing. And all of the previous breaks that I'd had, and my attempted suicide when I was 18, I finally got to that point where I was like, okay, I'm ready to start listening. I'm ready to start opening my heart and following some sense of intuition, and just showing up and really saying, like, I'm here. What do you want from me, God, or however you choose to frame it? Because I'm kind of, you know, not able to work this thing out on my own.
Wow. So the next question, in a way, I thought of it, but you, because of what you just mentioned there about suicide, my question, because of what happened this week with Robin Williams, what is your sense of that journey, that open-hearted through poetry, how that could save somebody?
Well, I actually started a group called Break the Silence, which is a support group for suicide attempt survivors. And I've shared all of the materials, the book and everything on there, and it's really just encouraging people to be connected, to be in community, and to realize that they're not alone. And you can have that experience with another human being, and if you have that enough, if you connect enough vulnerably and honestly and openly with others, you can start to do it with yourself. It kind of teaches you to do it with yourself, and then you can start to share that with others.
And then the last one would be, we do live in a world that's full of conflict, and you know, right now we've got it in the Middle East and everything. What do you think is the greatest thing that we could do outside of being in that conflict to put something positive, to do something positive that could help heal it?
It's a very powerful question. Thank you. And what a tragic situation it is. You know, the kind of perspective that many people share is that we need to heal the conflicts within ourselves in order to see some sort of reflection of that in the world, and that's the most powerful contribution we can make to anyone else's conflict. And you know, I agree with that, and I believe that is a part of the work, but I believe that we could also openly share our hearts with people who need it. And I, for example, support the Syria campaign, which is endlessly trying to just make people aware of the incredible atrocities that are happening on a daily basis. As you scroll through your Facebook feed and you move from genocide to a viral video about you know, someone falling down a hole or something like that, you know, and it kind of anesthetizes us. So I believe if we could just take a moment of quiet reflection for those who are really, really suffering and really, really need it, that would be a wonderful thing. And there's an extraordinary poem. It's very, very short. That a wonderful process work practitioner who I did a bit of training with in Cape Town called Nyati Avers. She shared this poem, and I'm going to share it with you now. It's by a poet from Gaza called Khalid Juma. He's a Palestinian poet from Gaza. Oh, rascal children of Gaza, you who constantly disturbed me with your screams under my window, you who filled every morning with rush and chaos, you who broke my vase and stole the lonely flower on my balcony, come back and scream as you want and break all the vases, steal all the flowers, come back, just come back.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. 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 What a beautiful poem. Well, I really would love it if we could just continue this conversation. And inside, I almost get the feeling like it is really now that I'm starting to connect at a deeper level, you know, with these metaphors, and they're speaking to me. Unfortunately, we're coming to the end of our time together, and what I love, as just as a final question, Michael, if you could just share with anyone who might be listening to us tonight, either live or for the broadcast, the rebroadcast, the playback of this video, how they can download your book, where they can go to have access, and of course I will be posting links underneath this video.
Thank you very much, Gabriel. Thank you, Terry. The Facebook group is called Escape to the Homelands of the Heart, Awaken Your Inner Poet. And there's also a Facebook page, and the book is on iTunes. If you don't use Apple products, you can download a copy of the book. There's a link to a PC version, a PDF version. Unfortunately, you're not going to get the benefit of all the videos and everything, but they're slowly being posted on YouTube. But you can get a link to a PC version in the Facebook group. And the Facebook group is also just a great place to connect. And a big part of this journey is about connecting with ourselves and others. So it's really a great spot to open up a little bit, get vulnerable, put yourself out there, and just be received.
Okay, great. So as I said, I'll be putting a link to where you can download and start listening to his narration. And I'll definitely recommend that you do your best to get the Mac version that you can get off iTunes into iBook, because that one allows you to look at all the videos and actually have Michael narrate or what would you say, recite your poems, like speak your poems. I'd rather use the word speak your poems. So Michael, any last words before we say goodnight?
Just thank you very much. It's such a great privilege, and really, really appreciate you inviting me here, Gabriel, and lovely to meet you, Terry. And thank you for receiving me so beautifully. And to anyone who wants to pick up this book, thank you. It's a wonderful, wonderful gift to me, and hopefully to you as well. So check it out.
Thank you, Michael. I'd like to just invite our audience to maybe, and I say this for myself as well, to venture into doing something with poetry, and that maybe underneath this video, this recording, that the people who watch it actually take some time just to write a few lines of what's come up for them recently. Mm-hmm. And take even our little community as a first step to express something, and then take your invitation, Michael, to join your bigger Facebook group into a community where they don't know each other, and step into another bigger unknown.
Wonderful. Sounds great. And if anyone is having a problem with how to start, grab a copy of the book, and there's tons of exercises in there. There's some really fun, simple ones. It will just give you a lead in.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Michael.
Thanks. Yeah, thank you, Terry.
Yeah, beautiful. What about you, Terry? My question for you is, what are you taking away from the evening? What's your biggest insight or takeaway?
My biggest takeaway actually is to have a go at doing something that scares the bejesus out of me, and that's to do a four-line poem to stick underneath this video.
Woohoo!
Okay.
The inner poet is awakening.
I'll let you be the judge of that, Michael.
Oh, there's no judgments, Terry. There's no judgments. It's all love.
Yeah, beautiful. And for me, it's just a deeper sense of connection and with myself, actually, and also the reminder that that like Terry, sometimes during my day I feel the impulse to write a poem, or even find myself like, oh, there's like these 2-3 lines, but I don't do anything about it. I don't write it down. It kind of comes in, and then it just goes away, and 30 minutes later I'm like, gee, what was that thing I was thinking about earlier? Why didn't I write it down? Because it's like now completely gone. So I'm going to make I'm giving you my commitment that the next time I have a moment like that, I will stop, pause, and write it down, and sit with it for a little bit longer. So thank you very much again, Michael, for hanging out with us. Again, I will be posting links to how you can access Michael's ebook, Escape to the Homelands of the Heart. And then also, people can actually download your book or get all the links also by going to your website, right? Which I believe is Mr. Michael Dale, right? Mr. Michael Dale.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
Yep.
Yeah. All right. So thank you so much for hanging out with us, and I look forward to hanging out with you and hopefully Terry again in about 2 weeks' time. Okay. Thank you very much. Bye bye, guys.
Thanks so much, guys.
Bye bye.
Okay. Bye bye.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.